Hello, I'm Pam, and welcome to this week's episode of Anonaholics Anonymous. For those of you who have never seen a video before, this channel is about recovery from any sort of obsessive behaviors or addictions, or for people who are affected by somebody else's obsessions or addictions. Last week we started with step 1, which was what being powerless means, and this week we're going to talk about step 2, which is the next logical step in my mind, and it's the next one we have to take. So I'm going to be sharing my experience with step 2. So what I'm going to read to you is a couple of areas in a really awesome big blue book. I can't name it because this is an anonymous channel with anonymous recovery, so I'm just going to read parts of it so that you can see from my experience what has stuck out the most to me and been very helpful. For those of you who don't know, step 2 is coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves, which can sound pretty daunting if you're not familiar with that type of thing. So, this is the first part that made a lot of sense to me. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life was sufficient to overcome anonaholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources were not sufficient. They failed utterly. The reason that that quote made so much sense to me is that obviously if I'm powerless and I've tried everything that I can think of, then yes, my ideas as a person have not worked. So it's just reiterating what we already know. The next part that made a lot of sense is this part that talks about different bedevilments. The bedevilments are what we actually suffer from. These are the bedevilments. You don't have to have all of them, but, well, you don't have to have any of them. That's probably the best situation, but this is what they are. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. This is what's underneath all of our addictive behaviors, and as long as these conditions are still present in our lives, we're still suffering from untreated anonaholism. The real solution for us is really having freedom from these conditions, so we're no longer compelled to act out in addictions or obsessions or compulsive activities. So this is what the spiritual experience and our psychic change that we're looking for are really all about in recovery. It's about getting rid of these bedevilments. The next quote is something I really like because it explains why having faith is actually extremely logical. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. That really hit me hard, because it made me realize, okay, if I can have faith in reason, and that hasn't worked, then maybe I can have faith in something else, and it might work. And then it goes on to point out, we found too that we had been worshippers. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, this state of awe and wonder have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence and choices? Is it impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship? In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. So that's pretty encouraging. You know, in one point in this book, someone that I know asked me the question, what if logic was everything? Like, what if that was just everything, and that's all that there was? How would that feel? And I thought about it, and it felt awful. It felt so, like, cold and alone and horrible. I decided right then and there, there's no way that I wanted to live a life anymore based on the idea that logic is everything. Here's the next part of the book. Hence we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. Obviously, because if it was entirely dependable, then we wouldn't be here on this channel! So now that we know that logic and reason isn't everything, and that it's not entirely dependable, then how do we go about figuring out what our personal conception of a higher power could be? Here's part of the book that I really like that helped me with this. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God or higher power. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps, which are the rest of the steps. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It's open, we believe, to all. Nothing can be wrong in regards to a concept of a higher power as long as it works for you. That was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe, so it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. So the very last section of this is the second step, choice. This is how it goes. When we became Anonaholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either a higher power is everything, or else it is nothing. A higher power either is, or it isn't. This is the second step choice. It is the last step you'll make. This is the last choice you'll make. After step 2, it is not about choice, it's about asking for direction. What was our choice to be? My choice is that a higher power did exist, and that a higher power was everything. So, I like that a lot better than it being nothing.